sort your symbols, reference real life, and vary your values. Hi guys, I'm Solstice, and thank you for wandering into my orbit today. So when I was in classes for design and had to finish multiple assignments every 2 weeks, one of the more difficult elements I could find when making art is ironically utilizing color. So much so I would even hear professors complain students came in with great color schemes in their portfolios or first semester projects, but after a year or two, their color schemes just seemed to warp into these unpleasant choices. And of course, I went in thinking, what the hell are they talking about? Only to end up exactly like that come sophomore year. Now the main issue for this wasn't that I hated coloring my work, quite the opposite. It was arguably my favorite part of the process. But there is a point when drawing for schoolwork that when you're not as personally invested in a project, or even when you don't have it as fleshed out as you may want, that trying to make good color schemes can be difficult. When I was younger, I worked primarily off of vibes and used color pencils and markers as my little weapon of choice. But now that I work digitally and often use my traditional work for concepts, it's like I have so many options and I want to use them all, but of course, in my case, that's just going to make a giant mess of oversaturated colors, which, if they're not already hurting the eyes of anyone particularly photosensitive, I end up unhappy with the general result of. See, I can grab colors out of a hue cube that I think look nice, but in practice they don't always sit right when I apply them, and before I worked in digital, I just had a set of pencils or markers, so every color I had was a choice of how hard I pressed on paper, but on screens now, all the pressure determines is how thick your lines are. And so in my time during and after school, I found some strategies that can help you a bit once you've got the basics of color theory down. Keep in mind, this video is not to say that your color choices are inherently wrong or bad, however you collect them, but that for those who struggle to find color palettes they're happy with, or even those who struggle to find any proper colors to use, these strategies might be helpful for you as it was for me. Now, the closest to a clever acronym I have to remember this is going to be SRV. Sort your symbols, reference real life, and vary your values. First things first is going to be sort your symbols. In the case of character design, shape language can apply not just to circles, squares, and triangles, but also to symbols for your character. But today we're going to use these for color scheme. This includes themes and motifs as you see fit. For my character here, Rowan, the symbols I associate with him are autumn leaves, foxes, rope, iron, and mud. Now, most character designers will tell you for a character, you want a solid 2 to 3 colors for the sake of being memorable, and I'm here to tell you that 2 to 3 colors can apply to hues, aka your general Roy G. Biv colors of the rainbow, and 2, that 2 to 3 colors is ideal for main characters and a lot of professional work. If it's not your goal here, then you don't need to follow it for this right now, and you can simplify later if need be. Now, I'm not going to say you need a specific limited number of symbols, but you do want to try your best to narrow them down to around a single digit number so we can properly apply the next step. I found it easiest when I wrote character descriptions, but whatever you feel most comfortable with works just fine, and you also don't have to take my recommendations of this as a must. I find it works for me, but that doesn't mean it inherently applies to you, and that is okay. Now there's referencing real life. In art, referencing real life is often applied to learning realism so you can stylize as well as understand origins of things, and so you can apply more unique design approaches to them. And today what we're going to do is sort of a similar thing. We're going to be looking up our symbols and color picking from them. If you have any idea of particular colors and how they correlate with particular symbols, even if they're not the exact color, say for example in my head, I associate the color blue with iron, but there's not exactly blue iron out there. What we're going to need to do is get creative and look at images with tints, shadows, hues, and highlights. Shadows and highlights in particular are also great for off-whites and off-blacks, as solid white or black is often not something that's easy to shade or add highlights to if you ever plan to do it. In terms of placing them, you can split your colors up according to their hues, but if you're not too picky on which colors go where, just make sure to order the colors light to dark either way. The fun thing about doing this is our brains are pattern recognizing, and so the little things you associate with the funny little friend in your head are great tools to utilize so other people will get the same associations that you do when looking at them. Now for the final step, varying your values. How you do the coloring is going to be up to you. Personally, I prefer to have a transparent background, so I usually export the image as a PNG, and then I reopen it to color underneath cleanly, and then after that, we can get to turning on a black and white layer adjustment, or whatever works equivalently to your art program. The idea here is that we can turn the filter on and off on a whim, so that way we can check our colors afterwards. Preferably, I want you to keep this on the entire time we do the coloring process. I will ask you to give it at least a shot for the sake of like trying it out all the way. And if you want to do a bit of like a hard mode, try to take each section of your colors, and before you turn on the black and white filter, cross out the most saturated ones and try not to use them, just to like get some other colors in there, and also so you don't try to leap to the most saturated ones right away. From here, we're going to do what I call blind coloring. You can both use this to see what direction your eyes are drawn to, and to not worry too much about getting caught up on the brightest colors. It's easy to grab the saturated ones because they're the most eye-catching, so they tend to be the ones that grab our attention the most. But the thing to keep in mind is your other colors can be eye-catching depending on what they're surrounded by, and using those values that we're going to be focusing on as a means to distinguish what your brightest color for your character's scheme is. So much so, after I get my colors set up, I've become like a huge fan of crossing out the most saturated looking ones to avoid them, just so I can get a little more interesting colors for my character's palette. If you're working with a human design, I do recommend your skin tone being the first color you grab, as presumably this will be the one you want to build your scheme around, and it's also one of the colors that you're most confident in the choice of. When grabbing colors, you can check the value number if you open up a grayscale bar, which will show its numbers as values between 1 and 100, depending on how close they are to being white or black. Ideally, you're going to generally want your values to have a difference of 10. It doesn't need to be exact, but having a 62 and 63 means it can make it difficult to tell where your eyes are meant to look when looking at the design, just because the values are so similar. But say a 63 and a 73, for example, or even like larger gaps than that, like I don't know, like 50 and 80, those ones have a much better contrast, and it does give your eyes a little bit of an easier way of telling where you're supposed to look, whether it's focusing on the brightest colors or the boldest, or even just like the darkest ones, because I mean all color palettes kind of vary, but having those distinct differences in the values even in grayscale is going to be a really helpful tool for giving you more contrast and telling the direction that your eyes are supposed to be looking when making the design. And once we think it looks balanced, our eyes are drawn to a singular point, we can turn off the grayscale filter, and there we go. On the off chance you choose a color that's value was okay, but a color appears too bright and flashy where it shouldn't, my personal strategy is to turn back on the grayscale filter, grab it with the magic wand, and then use the filter to track your value as you desaturate the color and hit like the fill hotkey. If it's lighter or darker than your initial value, go up or down the hue cube accordingly, just that way you can find a desaturated color, but also try to make sure you've maintained the same value it held prior, just so that way you still have the same balance. Once again, it's not foolproof, but it certainly helped me when I'm at a loss of where to start in terms of my color schemes. Alright, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I know this isn't the usual videos that I've made in the past, but I really wanted to make this one as I've had friends ask me how I choose my color palettes, and as much as I love to show and explain to help my fellow artists, it can be really difficult when I have a job with long hours, and so I hope this video helps you in your works just as much as it did mine. And if you have any questions, feel free to toss them in the comments, and I'd be happy to help give you some input, as well as I'm pretty sure plenty of other people will be happy to help you as well. Check out my resources and assets in the description, and I hope you guys had fun in the solar system today. Bye!